So if we start first off with the idea of finding acceptance, right? Acceptance is something a lot of us struggle with because in one thing or another, because we don't necessarily define it in the best way, right? Acceptance is not about giving in, and it's not about giving up. When we accept something, we're not saying, I surrender in a negative way, I'm helpless, I'm powerless, right? That's not acceptance. It's also not ignoring or denying the difficult, right? We're not saying that because I accept a situation, I am refusing to acknowledge what's challenging about it. And it's also not, acceptance is not about saying I accept and therefore I'm completely okay with everything that's happening. You can accept something and still acknowledge the fact that there are elements of it that you struggle or disagree with. So what acceptance is, and I really love this definition by Identity Magazine, is embracing something without resistance, embracing what is without resistance. I don't know if you know about the Serenity Prayer. I think it's especially powerful with this. It says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, religious or not, right? It's I wouldn't consider it in that respect. But the idea of really trying to understand, which is going to be a running theme for us, of what can you affect? What can you influence? What can you change? Focus on that. When we are struggling with accepting, you'll see this in perhaps yourself and others. There's sort of three things we tend to do as we struggle with acceptance. I call it the blame, complain, and drain. Blaming, and you've probably been seeing that around in this current situation, is, we are angry, we feel helpless, sometimes we feel hopeless, or others do. And so we react by blaming someone, looking for a target to project our anger on, right? Another thing is that we complain. The difference between complaining and verbalizing emotions is that verbalizing is something where we are honestly expressing what we feel, but also with the intention of working with it. Whereas complaining is really incessantly repeating the same negativity without the slightest desire, orientation, or ability to see where you can change or improve it or help yourself at the very least. And drain is all these, right? When we are constantly struggling with acceptance, when we're pushing, when we're blaming, we're complaining, and other sort of, let's say, less constructive things in our search to accept acceptance, what we do is we end up draining really important resources that are exactly what we need in order to get through something, right? Whether it's to get more peace, whether it's to mobilize our energy for focus on something that we can change, or positivity, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do have to realize is that there is also kind of grief that is happening for some people nowadays. And grief doesn't mean necessarily that it's coming only from those who are in the most dire circumstances. They're losing jobs, they're losing lives, they're losing loved ones, they're on the front lines. Those, of course. But there are also quite a few people who are experiencing grief in the sense of the loss of the life we had, or the loss of the way things were. And it's really important to acknowledge that, because a lot about today in accepting is also accepting that it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay that even if you have moments when you feel okay and you feel you can, it's okay not to feel okay in other moments, because that is the first sort of stepping stone in general to say, I can move forward, but I don't need to expect that my motivation, which we'll talk about next week, that my focus is always 100%. Okay. So the question right now is, what will help you find peace with the current reality, right? What will help you make peace? What will help you accept the current reality in a way that works for you so that you can work with some new things going forward? A couple ideas how to do that, right? One is to really try and mentalize that the fact that this situation is what it is, to no fault of anyone's, and it's going to last as long as it's going to last. We're getting a lot of conflicting news to what degree that will last in one way, in a more extreme way, in a less extreme way, but we can't change this. And so as much as you can make peace with the fact that that is the circumstance, but we also don't know where things are going to turn out. there may be a lot of great things that come out of this, unfortunately, through a lot of difficulty as well, but we don't know. So don't go there. Right now, it is what it is, right? Understand with the fact that everybody's affected. Some people are having particularly difficult reactions to this, regardless of where they are in the situation, but everybody's affected. And so if you're seeing situations where someone's behaving in a way that may be challenging for you, keep in mind that we're all in that same boat, right? And that we all need help at times with this. When you feel overwhelmed, when you feel moments, we did our second session about how to manage difficult emotions. When you're feeling either emotions or just a cognitive struggle, even with what does this mean, where we're going, what I would say is take a moment. We always say, don't run away, don't push away violently emotions or certain thoughts, because it just makes them bigger and gives them more power, right? Acknowledge it. And part of acknowledging it is also saying something along the lines of, let's say you're feeling a sudden squeeze of anxiety of, oh God, what will the future be like? Right? And then as a result, you want to do something that may not be very good for you. One of the things that we say is, embrace that in the sense of saying, hey, anxiety, I see you. Come sit down with me. Have a seat with me, right? Understanding that that's coming up for you because that anxiety is actually trying to protect you in a way. It doesn't realize that it's not being entirely constructive, but all these things that come from us, these mixed emotions, these reactions, is because we're trying to protect ourselves in some sort of reptilian or childlike brain, right? And so accepting it, even that emotion, and saying, sit down with me, but hold on. What you're trying to do for me, I understand it comes from the best place, but it's not working. So just hold it, sit there for a second, right? This can be a very powerful way. Breathing through it. We've talked about the power of breath, and next week we're going to do some seriously awesome mindfulness and relaxation techniques. So we're going to talk more about that. But also the idea of disconnect, acknowledge it, but you can also disconnect. If you see that it's getting particularly powerful for you, this struggle with accepting something, then turn to something that's going to snap you out of that spiral, right? Rest. A lot of us, again, don't realize how much energy is being pulled into all this transition, into all this uncertainty. And so when you're feeling run down, do as my wonderful acupuncturist, Dr. Lou, says, just rest, take a moment for yourself. And as we say, don't feed the bad wolf. We talked about this, inside us is a good wolf and a bad wolf, this wonderful story of old. And the question of which one wins is the one you feed. So when you're getting anxious or you're struggling with acceptance, try and resist the feeling of, let me just go Google every possible bad scenario and see what the chances are it comes out, right? We love Google, but in certain things like medical advice or medical symptoms and certain other things like this, it can be a little bit catastrophic to go searching ad nauseum. So the other thing is connect to our shared consciousness. What this means is at any one point in your life, no matter what you're going through, there are many others out there who are going through the same thing in their own way. And this is such an important, I think, recognition, because we feel so alone in our struggles, even if there's someone right next to us who feels the same way. But that aloneness is what often causes so much more strife and grief for us. So this idea of shared consciousness, especially now, is if you're having moments when you're struggling with acceptance, remember, you're not alone. And there's a really beautiful breathe in, breathe out, which I will share with you today. It can work just for you, or you can kind of share it with others. And the way it goes is you breathe in whatever challenging fears you're feeling or emotions or etc. And as you breathe out, you focus on something positive to try and dispel it. So you can breathe in insecurity and fear and uncertainty. And as you breathe out, try and focus on security and strength and courage. And you can do that thinking of yourself. It works quite well, honestly, especially if you practice it a little bit. But you can think about it also for our shared consciousness, that as you breathe out, maybe you breathe that out for others as well and spread that, because energy is a powerful thing. We don't exactly know how it works in terms of these sorts of situations, but but you've all seen what it's like to be with someone with good energy versus someone who's always draining yours. So put that good energy out for yourself and others. There's also something, people keep saying this too shall pass. Yes. Others keep saying, yeah, this too shall pass, but when? When can we get there? I just want this to be over. And I'll share with you something my husband said to me years ago. It was a particularly intense and difficult time. And I said something along the lines of what a lot of us say, which is, I just want this to be over. I want time to fly so we get to the next weekend or the next vacation. And he said to me, it's the arrogance of youth to want time to pass by more quickly. And he didn't say it judgmentally, quite the contrary. It's a bit of a joke between us because he's older than me. But it stuck with me so very much because I think it's immensely powerful and immensely true. If you speak with elderly folks who've been through a lot, especially those who've been through wars and other crises, or just people who have gone through challenges in their lives, they know how precious time is. And they know that time is really what we do with it, no matter what's happening for you or with you. And so this idea of just wanting to, rush to the next thing and rush this to be over, we're missing out on what this has to teach us. Because you know what, as much as now a lot of people are sort of idolizing how great it was back then before the confinement, the reality is that many of us back before the confinement were so too busy running around doing whatever was so important at the time that we didn't even appreciate it. So maybe there's a day that we'll say, oh my gosh, remember that time we were able to stay home and just do this, this, and that. So what do you make of it, right?